But when they are organized and their nervous system is organized, they're going to be able to remember their homework. They're going to be able to have new ideas when it comes to their homework assignment. They're going to be able to regulate their emotions so much better and, work on that impulse control and not act out in maybe a negative way. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica.
We are both occupational therapy assistants. We are both certified primitive reflex clinical specialists, and we are here today talking about the specific connection between sensory processing and executive functioning skills.
So first, we need to talk about what sensory processing is and talk about how we actually have 8 senses, not 5.
Yes.
Now, if you've been with us for a long time, we've talked about this before, but it's always a good review. And if you're a new listener, it's good for us to let you know what we love to talk about.
Yeah. We love to talk about the 8 senses, and we love to talk about how in elementary school, we all learned about the, core 5, the touch, the taste, the smell, the sight, the sound, right? I can never remember those for some reason, off the top of my head. I have to think about it. So we all know about those common core 5, right? But the 3 hidden senses are honestly some of the most important in my opinion, and Jessica's opinion as well, for sensory modulation and organization, self-regulation. So these 3 hidden senses: proprioception, vestibular, and interoception.
So those 3 senses, we'll just do a really quick overview in case you're unfamiliar with those 3. Vestibular is our sense of movement. We have receptors in our inner ears. So anytime our head moves, which is typically led by our vision, we turn to look at something, we turn upside down to do a somersault, that activates those receptors in our inner ears, and that's our vestibular system telling us where our body is, orienting us, or getting disoriented if we struggle with vestibular processing. Proprioception is kind of the opposite, where it's more grounding and regulating, where vestibular is very alerting. We also have receptors in our joints and our muscles that tell us where our body is, how we're moving, where we're moving, how much force we need to be using when we move. And that's our proprioception. Proprioception is also connected to our tactile system for deep touch, pressure, or compression, which is also very calming to the nervous system. And finally, interoception, this is our internal sense of how our body is doing. Are we hungry? Are we thirsty? Do we need to go to the bathroom? Are we tired? Are we anxious? Has a lot to do with that homeostasis, and then has a very big connection to our emotions and how we're feeling moment to moment.
Beautiful explanation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So when we are talking about sensory processing, sensory modulation is specifically what we're referring to when we talk about over-responsive, under-responsive, and sensory craving. So that's really what we're going to focus on today as it connects to our executive functioning. So if you're unfamiliar with executive functioning, it's really, the skills to keep us organized, to keep us focused, to work on our impulse control. These executive functioning skills are basically required to get us organized, get us through school days, get us through our work days, just our everyday, mundane tasks. Can we remember what we just read? Can we take our ideas and can we organize them into a daily planner? Some of those just basic skills are what we call executive functioning skills. And so what we're going to focus on today is that connection. If someone is struggling with their sensory processing, sensory modulation abilities, how is that in turn going to impact negatively their executive functioning skills?
Yeah, and I think one other thing with executive functioning skills is emotional intelligence and emotional regulation is a big piece, which because our emotions are connected to our sensory processing and our interoceptive system, we can actually see like a really easy connection there. But we always talk about the pyramid of learning, and this is a really great place to talk about it because the foundation of the pyramid of learning is our sensory processing. Also primitive reflexes, but that's a whole nother topic. Sensory processing, sensory modulation is that base of the pyramid, that strong foundation where executive function skills, which lie in our prefrontal cortex, which we now know our prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until our 20s.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, the executive function skills lie at the top of the pyramid, which means if we have holes in the base of the pyramid, if there are challenges with sensory processing, there's not a strong foundation to be able to access those executive function skills at the top of the pyramid.
So the challenge with that, this pyramid is great, but like Jessica said, if we have holes in the pyramid and we are sending kids to school and we're asking them to do these higher level academic skills, we're asking them to take their homework home and turn to page 295 and they can't remember what the instructions were, and we're asking them to visually track and do all of these higher level skills. If they don't have a strong foundation of sensory processing and sensory modulation skills, then there's no way they're going to be able to successfully complete those academic skills. They're going to either get in trouble, they're going to fall behind, they're going to, leave things at school that they are supposed to bring at home. They're going to get misdiagnosed maybe with ADHD when it's actually an executive functioning challenge, or it's a sensory processing challenge, or it's a primitive reflex challenge, or an ocular motor challenge, or just basically any other challenge. But I mean, they're all connected. So that's where this connection really connects.
That's where the connection connects. It's funny that you mentioned like forgetting things at school, because that made me think of something. My son, who's 11, I picked him up from school on Monday. Normally he walks home, but Monday we went out to the archery range after school. So I picked him up and he's walking to the car and he doesn't have any of his things. He had his backpack, but he didn't have his gloves, didn't have his lunchbox, and he didn't have his violin, all left in the classroom. And he's 11, and these are things that he does every single day. And he doesn't have sensory processing disorder. He doesn't have ADHD, but he's 11. He's a kid.
So what did you say?
I'll get there. Hold on.
Okay.
His prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet. So for me as his parent, I can have expectations that he will remember those things most of the time. But remembering that because his prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, his executive functioning skills are not, I guess, all there, I guess is what you could say. They're not fully developed. He's going to forget sometimes. So he got in the car and I was like, hey, looks like you're forgetting some stuff. And he was like, oh, my violin and my gloves. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to drive up to the front. I never go to the front of the school for pickup just because it's a zoo.
Yeah.
So it's down one of the side streets. But by this point, it had mostly cleared out. So I was like, I'm going to drive to the front. You're going to run in and you're going to push the buzzer on the front because the ladies at reception are still there. So they're going to let you in. And so he ran in and got his stuff. But I just think
he genuinely forgot, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's just important to remember as we're talking about these things, executive functioning, sensory processing, our kids are not perfect. We can't expect them to be perfect. They're going to have off days. They're going to forget. We as adults forget things sometimes. So as we're talking about these things, it's important to remember that we still need to be helping our kids through these challenges, even if they don't have a diagnosis, even if they are doing well, that we can't expect perfection. And I read somewhere, probably online somewhere, that as parents, it's like we are our child's prefrontal cortex for them, teaching them these executive function skills, right? So anyways, you saying that brought that story to light.
Yeah. And honestly, let's kind of sidestep a little bit and talk about how we're going to like nourish the sensory system.
Nourish the sensory. That was a good word.
Help the executive functioning skills, right?
Yeah.
So we have to have an organized nervous system. We have to be in a nice rest and digest state in order to be able to remember our backpack, remember our gloves, remember our violin, remember plan out our day, grab all the things, regulate our emotions. So we have to be in that good rest and digest state in order for that to happen. So when we're talking about nourishing the sensory system, that can be in the classroom setting, things like setting up a little sensory break area or having like a little safe sensory area set up with a beanbag chair or a tent and some visuals and some fidgets, some headphones, just some things that are organizing for the nervous system. That can be taking lots of sensory breaks throughout the day as well. So making sure that our nervous system isn't getting overridden with sensory input. That can be turning off completely the fluorescent lights and just having lamps on, or like using those little covers over them. And I mean, anytime I'm in a location with fluorescent lights, I swear to you, it's like instant headache. Like I'm miserable for the rest of the day. And so kids aren't going to be able to say, excuse me, Miss Harrington, can you turn off the fluorescent lights, please? They're giving me a headache. Like kids don't know that. They're not going to advocate for that.
Most adults don't know that.
Most adults. Here you go. This is your reminder. But really just fueling the nervous system in order to keep it organized and calm. And when they are in that good rest and digest, wow.
Well, rest and digest are difficult to say together.
They are. Thank you for empathizing with me. But when they are organized and their nervous system is organized, they're going to be able to remember their homework. They're going to be able to have new ideas when it comes to their homework assignment. They're going to be able to regulate their emotions so much better and, work on that impulse control and not act out in maybe a negative way. So those are just a few things, first steps that you can take to support their executive functioning skills through their nervous system. Hey there, we want to take a quick minute and let you know about our new live upcoming webinar where we are talking all about multisensory processing.
Join us on Monday, January 20th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time for a free webinar where we are going to talk to you all about how multisensory processing activities are so important to include in the daily routine.
If you are an OT practitioner who works with kids with retained primitive reflexes, dyslexia, ADHD, any learning challenges, you will also earn 0.2 AOTA CEUs, which means it is 2 hours of continuing education units.
If you can't join us live, we still highly encourage you to register because you will be emailed the recording afterwards.
Hopefully we'll see you there. You can click the link below to register.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite ways to, work on sensory regulation and modulation is going outside.
Yes.
Getting lots of outside time, running, jumping, climbing. When you're outside, you're just going to be in a more regulated state because you don't have, like Rachel mentioned, the fluorescent lights. Even if you don't have fluorescent lights, it's still artificial light, so it kind of tricks the brain. You're going to have fresh air, as fresh as can be, depending on where you're at.
As fresh as can be.
You're getting contact with the ground, especially if you can be barefoot. So incorporating daily outside time into your child's routine is going to be really important. First thing in the morning, after school, before bedtime. Those are the ideal times to go outside, and that's really going to have a huge impact.
I'm just envisioning teachers taking their whole classroom outside.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
No, but let me finish. Okay, everyone, take your shoes off. We're going to go walk or lap in the grass and
be great.
Get grounded and smell the roses and blow out the candles. Like, I would love that. So if you do that, will you please let us know if you do that? That'd be great.
That'd be great.
Thanks. Yeah.
From an executive functioning standpoint, my brain got ahead of my mouth right there. Breaking tasks up into smaller pieces can be really helpful, especially if, say, your child comes home with a really large school assignment that's going to require a lot of initiation, organization, planning, prioritization, time management, all of these different pieces of executive function, but it's this big project and they are overwhelmed and they don't know what to do to get started. First, do some sensory activities. Go outside, get a snack, drink some water. Play and connect first to regulate the nervous system. Then come to this big project. Can you help them identify how to break the project up into smaller steps? Write out a list to prioritize it. What's going to get done first? Oftentimes our kids are going to be overwhelmed with these big projects because they don't know how to start. So we can teach them. We don't do it for them, but we teach them how they can do it. Sometimes asking questions, sometimes showing them the first step and then letting them do the next step and kind of chaining to help them get started. But if, maybe it's cleaning their room, right? That's another example that is often challenging for my child specifically. But for him, I think it's more of just motivation. He just doesn't want to. But cleaning your room can be a really overwhelming task, especially for a small child. So instead of telling your child, go clean your room, and they go to their room and they just sit and play because they don't know what to do, break it up into smaller pieces. Say, okay, pick up all of your clothes. Put all your clothes away. And then they do that. You give them a high five. Maybe you go play for a couple of minutes and then you come back and say, okay, next is put all the Legos away. And they do that piece. And you're helping them break it up into manageable pieces so they're not overwhelmed.
I'm going to piggyback on that and break it down a little bit more. Adding visuals is really helpful for the executive functioning system as well. So what we can do with the cleaning of the room example is we are going to take a picture of the room when it's all clean, everything's put away, the clothes are hung up, the bed is made, I almost said the shit's organized.
The shit's organized. It is though.
All the things are organized and it's beautiful. So we take a picture of that. We tape that up on the wall and we say, this is what your room looks like clean. So let's get to this, right? This is the goal here. So then you can have pictures of what the drawers should look like, and then you can put a picture on the outside of each drawer. Open the drawer, take a picture so they can see, okay, those are my pajamas. And you close the drawer, you tape that picture on the outside. This is what my shirt drawer should look like. Take a picture.
You don't hang your shirts in the closet?
Some of them, the big ones that don't fit in the dresser. This is a picture of my closet with everything hung up and put where it needs to be. This is where the cars go. I'm going to take a picture of the car basket. This is where the magnet tiles go. So you have everything, you have a picture of everything and what it should look like. So that way, when you say, go clean your room, it's this whole big overwhelming task. And it's like, no, we're going to break it down. Like Jessica said, put the clothes, put the Legos, put the magnet tiles. So that way they can see exactly what it needs to look like.
Yeah, visuals are really helpful. Yes. Yeah. Hopefully we made the connection for you on how sensory processing is going to affect executive function skills. If not, start over and listen again.
Or ask us your questions. You can leave a comment on Spotify if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube. You can send us a message on Instagram at All Things Sensory Podcast. We're happy to answer your questions.
Yes.
If you, try any of these, if you take your class out barefoot and walk around barefoot,
Rachel would love to hear.
Please send us a picture of that. I
was thinking if you want more ideas on sensory strategies, sensory activity ideas, how to create a sensory diet routine that's specific for your child based on their sensory needs, we do have a digital course. It's the Sensory Diet digital course. Teaches you all about sensory processing disorder. We talk about the pyramid of learning, and then you get an entire toolbox of sensory activities for each of the 8 sensory systems, and we teach you how to put it all together based on your child's specific sensory needs. So we do have that available for you. I think it's really helpful. We have a lot of parents, a lot of therapists in the course. It is approved for continuing education for occupational therapists. So there you go.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll plan on seeing you next week for another podcast.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes or message us on our Instagram account, which is at Harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.